Okay, so uh, good morning, good evening, good afternoon to everybody who is online. Thank you very much for joining us. Thank you very much to Anaí and Maya for inviting me to this session. I'm very happy to share my research in Chile on desalination. This is what I'm going to focus on. Um, I don't work in a very profound matter on governance or the commons, so I try to make some comments in the end or include the governance of the commons along my presentation. So I'd be very happy to have a conversation with you at the end or during if you want to uh, interact with me. There's no problem, no? So I have specialized in Chile, especially in drinking water, which I find it much more compelling than water in general, for reasons I'm going to discuss now. And I would like to show my research on the drinking water crisis in Chile, employing a feminist political ecology perspective on how the Chilean state responds to this crisis. So my overall argument, my main argument, I would like to start with that as an introduction, is that in Chile, our main institutional instrument for water distribution and property is the water code, no? So the Chilean water code is based on the tragedy of the commons, no? So it's very pro private property, almost absence of state regulation, etc. So water governance delegates distribution to a market with minimal state regulation and displaces governance failures onto citizens. So if we have governance failures on the state level, it's the citizens who have kind of, like, pay for it, no? These failures are embodied unequally. So I really like to study governance along scales. So the bodily scale, ecofeminism has brought me, and family geography and feminist political ecology have brought me to the body scale. So these governance failures are embodied unequally and are borne disproportionately, especially by poor women, either in rural or urban areas. And I think the latter one is less studied, no? Because usually when we talk about water insecurity and climate change impacts, we focus a lot on rural areas. So this disproportionate bearment of these governance failures produce deeply unequal domestic water governance. So I would like to see what happens when you introduce desalination, both on the household level and a personal level. So I would like first to give like a context. Sorry. I would like first to give the context on Chile's geography and economy, then see how climate change impacts water, to have an overview of what is happening in Chile right now with regards to water availability and crisis. After that, describe the Chilean drinking water crisis, see how desalination is introduced, and then see one type of methodology I applied to understand how households use water. So maybe you know a lot about Chile, maybe not. It's a Latin American country. I think it's the longest country in the world with 4,000 kilometers of length. This means a very long coastline, as we will see in a map in a second. It has almost 19 million people of population. It has got kind of a high GDP, and it's one of the top copper producers in the world. No, so Chile has one of South America's largest extractive economies, yet it is a very unequal country. So maybe the profits of mining and other extractivist activities, of course, they are not equally distributed along society, no? Chile is also a country that's very water stressed. Although we have glaciers, there is very high water availability in southern Chile. Still, it is a country that it is projected to have extremely high water stress by 2050. And this is because of a series of factors. Working from a political ecology perspective, I don't only focus on water availability per se as a physical number in terms of volume, but I'm also very interested how productive activities and institutional frameworks can produce scarcity. No, so it's very interesting when we see this map of Chile, as we saw. Chile is right here, this very slice of earth, no, next to Argentina. And as you can see, it has very varying climates, no? So in the north, we have an arid and semi-arid climate. This is where the Atacama Desert is situated, the world's driest place. Then we have a central valley with Mediterranean climate. And we have intensive export agriculture, like avocado is very famous, fruits, wine, etc. And in the south, we have an austral and south humid temperate climate, where forest monocultures are kind of dominating the landscape. We had a lot of native forest, but gradually since the 70s, it has been replaced by forest monocultures, especially pine and eucalyptus that are very water intensive. In the north, I forgot to mention that this is where most of the mining activities take place. So Chile is one of the most important countries in producing copper. It's also part of the lithium triangle between Bolivia, Argentina, in the Andes. And it also has silver and gold. And it's very interesting how we see that from north to south, water availability is being increased. And you can see here on the diagram on the right, we can see a difference between demand and availability. And as you can see, demand is sometimes like exceeding available water, resulting in scarcity. This is mainly because here in the north, mining activities are quite water intensive, although it is one of the industries that most recycle water and make a very efficient use of water, yet they are situated in a very dry desert. So how does climate change impact on water in Chile? So for the last 15 years, we have had a drought that has been named as mega drought or hyper drought, no? Chile has faced various droughts in the 60s, for example, but this one is particularly important because most productive and extractive activities are being affected also by that. It has also, climate change has also had an impact on glacier retreat, up to 30% of precipitation reduction. And at the same time, we have had pressures on productive uses, no? The Chilean state has responded quite well in institutional terms, in formal terms, no, with regards to climate change. So in 2022, the framework law on climate change was passed, and it also considers two types of instruments that I consider very interesting. From one hand side, we have the sectoral adaptation plans, so how certain sectors can adapt to climate change, and we have biodiversity, water resources, infrastructure, health, etc. The biodiversity one was recently, how can we say this, and retired from the current government. We had elections a few months ago, and in March, a new government took over, which is quite conservative, quite right-wing, and not very eager for environmental protection. Let's put it this way. We still have to see, we have like 4 years left But so far, during its first week, it has retired many plans regarding, I don't know, like protected areas, biodiversity, etc. On the other hand, the framework law on climate change also considers the creation of territorial action plans, not that have to do with climate action on regional and communal scales, but also in river basins. So in terms of institutional, in institutional terms, we do have laws that recognize climate change and aim for climate change adaptation, yet we have to see how these are, how can we say this, like traduced in real terms, no? The framework law on climate change also is very, has also set the basis for securing, for guaranteeing water security for all, and it is defined as the possibility of access to water in adequate quantity and quality, considering the natural particularities of each basin for its sustenance and use over time for human consumption, health, subsistence, socioeconomic development, conservation and preservation of ecosystems, promoting resilience to drought and flood-related hazards and pollution preventions. So we can say this is a quite complete definition. It considers quantity and quality. It considers more situated notions of adaptation. It does consider natural particularities of its basin. It also considers both lack and excess of water, no? It is very interesting to see. I would like to frame now how the Chilean water crisis has been building up and what have been the social responses to it. Here we have there was in 2019, there was a very important social uprising in Chile. It was called Revuelta Social, no, yeah, I think social uprising would be the name. And in this time, water was quite central in the people's demands, no, for nationalizing water, etc. So there was a motto that was very popular, and it was "No es sequía, es saqueo," which means it's not drought, it's looting, no? Meaning that the causes of the Chilean water crisis are not precisely physical, no, like a physical lack of water, but they're mostly political. This is very true, and me and my colleagues were very surprised in 2019 to see how people really politicized the water crisis and really understood the political roots of the crisis, no? So I think it's time to talk about the Chilean Water Code. I don't know, maybe Anaid has presented it in another session. Okay, so maybe this is a good time. So in 1973, there was a military coup in Chile that how can we say that came to substitute very violently, no, and with no democratic processes, Salvador Allende's like more socialist political program. And the military coup under Augusto Pinochet, the General Augusto Pinochet, imposed a neoliberal economic program, and these reforms started. In 1980, a new constitution was passed, again, kind of imposed and with no democratic procedures. And it is the constitution that we still have in Chile, like 46 years later, with two failed attempts to overthrow it, but it was not possible. So 1 year after the constitution, the water code was enacted. Okay, so the water code, the Chilean water code, is based on the tragedy of the commons. The idea is the following one. if water is a common good and everybody shares water sources, these are going to be depleted. So the best thing is to separate water rights from land rights, and people can be owners of these water rights. Water rights are expressed in volume per time, like liters per second. It's the most typical one. And a water right gives you the right to extract water with the volume accorded, no? Um, People could go to the General Directorate of Water and ask for a water right, 1 liter per second, 2 liter per second. It was given to them freely, and it was something that you could own, trade, sell, or pass it to your children. So it was something that you could have forever, and it was given to you freely by the state. This is how all mining companies have their water rights. This is how big and old agriculture companies have their water rights. They're all freely given by the state to them, and they have them perpetually. I think it's very interesting if you work with the commons to see how the water code leaves water property to the people in a very private way and perpetuate way. And this permits the emergence of a market, no? Because if I have my water rights and I want to move, for example, I can sell them to somebody, or I could get water rights and wait for a drought to sell them, like in order to profit from them. So the water code changed everything on how water was managed in Chile. Before the water code, I think it was in the 50s or 60s, there was another code that was based on water rights as well. But the 1981 water code, I think it's a global example of extreme commodification and mercantilization of water. A very dear colleague who is an expert on the water code, Jessica Buds, Jessica, on an article of hers a few years ago, she was saying that it's not that the neoliberal economy allowed space for the water code, but it was the water code that was necessary for the neoliberal regime to be installed. So having these water rights, water was freely given to the mining companies, as I told you. It was also given freely to many hydroelectrical projects in the south, and this electricity production in the south, in the rivers, could also feed energetically mining in the north. So the water code permitted this allocation of water to very powerful actors, leaving in a way people a bit, this typical accumulation by dispossession process, no? That big actors, powerful actors accumulate water sources, and communities are left with very restricted access to water. And up to 2010, this was more or less okay, but the drought kind of revealed this situation. In this timeline here, I explain a bit like the after, what happened after the water code. In the 90s, mining and agro-export industries acquire bulk water rights, as I told you, and small farmers and communities lose access. In the 90s, it's just after the end of the dictatorship, yet this is where the neoliberal program flourishes, no? They have their water rights, they have energy, and mining and export, agro-export they are really, really developed. In the 2010, between 2010 and 2020, we have various social movements that demand water reform and a kind of nationalization of water resources, but this is quite impossible, no? Even during the social uprising, La Revuelta Social in 2019, this was not possible. There was absolutely no change in the water code, not until 2022, where we have a very small modification where water rights are not given in a perpetual manner, but only for 30 years. But this is only for the new water rights given. No, you cannot go back and change all the water rights that are given so far. So the Chilean water crisis is not unidimensional, no? Crises are not only born out of one situation. So we have the impact of climate change, as we said earlier, with the mega drought and a reduction in precipitations and augmentation of temperature. We have a very water-intensive productive sectors like mining and agriculture and forest monoculture. Of course, agriculture, as in most agricultural countries, or as most countries with agricultural production, we have some 70% of water needs going to agriculture and mining in like 3 to 5, but it is situated in the desert, so its impact it's quite important locally. Then we have the water code that permits the accumulation of water by powerful actors, and it creates injustices, conflicts, and lack of access for small farmers and communities. And then we have a mismanagement. No, the state is not big enough to control how water is used. There is overgranting of water rights, so we have had many issues of depletion of underground aquifers, etc. So this is what I was commenting before about the Chilean, about the social uprising in 2019, how the water crisis was framed and understood as a political crisis by the people. Here on the left, we can see a motto that says estatizar el agua, which is like nationalize water. Las aguas robadas serán recuperadas. Stolen waters will be retreated, or we will get back the stolen waters, no? And here on the right, it says they stole our water. We are going to burn their avocado trees. This is more radical, but honestly, people in the regions, the territories where avocados are cultivated, do really suffer from lack of water, no? So they're really angry with agro-export companies. So why do I focus on drinking water on this crisis? I don't want to talk about the whole water crisis, but I'm very interested on drinking water and what the state does on that. So we have the human right to water established by the United Nations in 2010. We have a sustainable development goal, number 6, on access to water and sanitation. We have the concepts of water security under climate change. Many people talk about water poverty, I'm sorry. And of course, we have many health and hygiene issues with respect to drinking water, no? And drinking water, it's not, we don't only have, we cannot talk about cubic meters or volumes. Quality is really important, and it has to meet very strict quality standards. And it's not only the quality standards in terms of microbiological and chemical or physical parameters, no? The potability of water has cultural, social, and psychological dimensions. And where I want to go here is that not any water is adequate for drinking, no? Beyond the biophysical parameters, as I said, there are many cultural conditions that define or permit us to drink some type of water and another not, no? So the idea here, and drawing from anthropology or feminist geography and feminist and emotional political ecologies, it's very important what relationship we have with different waters. And many people study also the social relations around water. So I would like to put some very simple examples. For example, if if a drought, let's say that drought carries on for 10 or 20 more years, then at some point we have to drink desalinated water, or we have to drink recycled water. Colleagues in Australia have this concept that they call the yak factor. Yak is like from disgusting, no? And they use this concept to explain why people in Australia would not drink recycled water, for example. And this is where I'm going, no? We have tap water, bottled water, surface water, desalinated water. Not all waters are the same, and we do not feel the same with all waters, no? And if we go beyond the drinking water, we also tend to characterize water. This water is good for you. This water is heavy, or there are waters that we call dangerous or sacred. No, like in many cultures, there are certain bodies of water that are sacred, like river, like the Ganges River in India, for example, no, or the Mapuche communities, indigenous communities in southern Chile that water is like a spirit, for example. So not all waters are the same for all people. So this makes the acceptance of drinking water much more complicated than it would be, like water for washing your hands, for example. So as I said earlier, the Chilean drinking water crisis is manifested both in rural and urban areas. The mega drought revealed this unequal distribution of waters through the water rights. And in the rural areas, we have depletion of traditional sources. We have accumulation of water rights by agro companies. And it's not only that people do not have water, but they could have water but with very low water pressure, which makes the life of rural women very difficult, no? They have to stay up at night in order for the washing machine to function. Or if you have low water pressure, you cannot have hot water, for example, and they have to shower at night. And in the urban areas, we have a management by private companies. All sanitary companies in Chile are private, apart from one. They see their water sources diminishing because we have a constant extraction and a lot of competition with mining, agro that are in the same areas. And from Santiago and from Santiago and to the north of Chile, people usually do not drink tap water. And they tend to drink bottled water, which of course it kind of doubles the cost of water access every month. We will see it in continuation. So this is Chile. These are in green. You can see where we have more availability than demand, and with the red color we see the municipalities or areas where demand exceeds water availability. And we can see that over 60% of Chile's population is in this central area where most of the municipalities are under water scarcity. The main solutions that are given in Chile, the Chilean state prioritizes solutions for productive uses where you have investments and mega projects. For human consumption, we have water trunks and desalinated water, which is what we are going to focus now. But in general, in Chile, we have supply increase strategies. There is very little water demand management, so the state doesn't try for people to consume less, especially for the productive sectors. And it ensures water for productive sectors more than human consumption. And there is a responsibility shift to the citizens, no? While the state doesn't ask for mining or agro to be more efficient, they do ask for people, to not have gardens or take shorter showers, etc. I have like 10 more minutes, so I will go fast into desalination. So in this context of very project-oriented solutions, very technocratic solutions, very bottom-down solutions with very, very low public participation, there appears desalination, no? Where the water markets promoted by the water code fail, we have a new, different, very a profitable market because most of the desalination plants in Chile are constructed by multinational companies coming from Spain or Japan. And as you can see here, these are the actual and projected desalination plants. Chile is very long. So this is the north of Chile and this is the south of Chile. In southern Chile, as you can see, there are hardly two plants. But in northern Chile, especially in the region of Antofagasta, which is my case study, we have many desalination plants. Desalination plants can be either for drinking water for human consumption, or they can be for, especially for mining in Chile. But lately, it has been more popular to construct multi-purpose plants, which means they are both for water consumption, mining, and even agricultural purposes. So in 2022, the Scientific Committee on Climate Change produced this report that has to do with opportunities and challenges in addressing water insecurity in Chile. I think it's only in Spanish. I don't know, Anna, if you know if it's in English as well, because it's a very well written and very thorough and detailed review on desalination. So if any of you speak Spanish and is interested in desalination, I strongly recommend it. As you can see here, this is a table of the actual and future desalination capacity per region. And as you can see, mining dominates the desalination sector. We have a production of 6,100 liters per second, while we have almost 2,000 liters per second for human consumption. So you can see where the weight is mostly posed on mining. Yet there are more and more cities that depend on desalination, especially on the coast of the Atacama Desert. Actually, we have more than 650,000 people supplied with desalinated water in 7 cities along the Atacama Desert, as I told you. And this is my case study. It's the Antofagasta region in the Atacama Desert. The Atacama Desert, as I told you, is the driest place on Earth. Here is a map of Chile. This red region is the region of Antofagasta. So Antofagasta is pioneer in desalination. No, it's Latin America's first and biggest desalination plant for human consumption, and it still is the largest desalination plant for human consumption in Latin America. It was constructed in 2003. And this is not new for the Antofagasta region, no? As I told you, Antofagasta region, this region is in the Atacama Desert, and it's one of the most important regions in copper mining. As you can see here, it accounts for 53% of Chilean exports of copper, so it exports half of the country's copper, and it corresponds to 16% of global copper production. So it's very important, no? as you can imagine, and as I told you earlier, that the state is mostly interested in productive uses. This is something historical, no? Antofagasta region and the Atacama Desert was host to the first solar desalination plant in the world, Las Salinas. And here I found um, an extract from a publication in 1908. And it says that the sun is a water sweetener, no? So you use the sun to transform salty water to sweet water or drinking water, no? So this is one of the first solar desalination plants that is used very simply, no? With evaporation and distillation of water, and you separate it from the salts, so you have water without the salts. Antofagasta was always a very dry place. It was born of mining. It was not close to any water sources. People were waiting for the aguateros, the watermen. They were coming and they would fill their buckets, as you can see in the picture. And nowadays, the city of Antofagasta, the region's capital, looks like this. It has a GDP equal to the United States, sorry, the Great Britain. It would be. So the region of Antofagasta, which exports copper, has a very high GDP, very unequally distributed among people, of course. And somebody would say, okay, so this development, maybe going from this to this, has to do with the desalination plant. And this is what the sanitary company claims, no? That the desalination plant was constructed because of urban demands. Yet, this is not exactly like that. In Antofagasta, we don't have exactly a swap contract where mining companies exchange water with communities, but this water swap became on an institutional level, no, between the sanitary company and mining companies under the vigilance and construction of this arrangement by the Chilean state. So people in the city of Antofagasta, the regional capital, drink desalinated water by the desalination plant. And the water that was distributed to the city is now sold to the mining industry, no? So essentially, the desalination plant was constructed in order to liberate fresh water for its use by the mining company in the Andes Mountains. And this coastal city is drinking desalinated water, no? So from my research and from other colleagues that investigated this under legal geography, for example, we have found that desalination did not decrease freshwater consumption. No, it's not that it did not it substituted freshwater consumption, but did not decrease it, but it has increased the water availability for mining. So what it did is essentially liberate water for mining uses. This has resulted to a very particular situation. Actually, the city of Antofagasta that you see here is supplied 100% by the desalination plant, but this took place like a couple of years ago. From 2003 to 2023, the city was supplied with distinct manners. So in the north, we have desalination water, like 11% of the population. In the center, we had a mix of desalinated water and mountain water. And in the south, we had purely mountain water. Since the desalination plant was constructed in the north, its supply as the desalination plants can be expanded, no? You can add more units and add more units and add more units. So as the desalination plant, its capacity for production was increased, then what desalinated water was more and more, infused, we can say, into the city's water distribution system. Um, Between 81 and 2014, we can see how urban development is really notorious in the northern part of the city. You can see in 2004 and 2014, this is the presence of green areas, and you can see how green areas are increased along the whole city, but especially in the north. Um, and it's also very interesting to see how people perceive water, no? In Antofagasta, we realized more than 1,000 surveys, and we ask people where they live and what they think about water, how they evaluate its quality and taste. And most of the people did not know what kind of water they were drinking. They did not know up to what point there was desalinated water or mountain water, etc. So people would evaluate water out of their, like a real experience, and not because they knew what kind of water they were consuming, no? And we can see here on the left, we see water quality, evaluación de calidad. This is water quality, overall water quality, and we can see it is very low, no? The same goes with the taste, especially in the north. And in the places where we have better evaluation are the places that are closer to the water tanks, we could say. And it's mostly associated to mountain water. So what I was interested in, once we knew that we had this different distribution of water mixes in the city of Antofagasta, we delved into social class, no? So, and we wanted to understand, we have this, like you have these regional changes, no? Where you have a swap between mining and people, then on the urban scale, and then we delved into the households. I don't think I have a lot of time, ¿verdad, Anaí? So I have to add in like 2 more minutes to start closing.
Yeah, 2 more minutes.
I cannot hear you.
2 more minutes, yes.
No te puedo escuchar.
Dos,
Just a second. Okay,
dos
now.
minutos. Dos
Yeah.
minutos más.
Okay, thank you very much. So we can see that the poorest households, okay, so even though we have an overall, ¿cómo es malestar, Anaí? I'm sorry, I forgot my English now. Like people do not like drinking water. They do not like its taste, and they evaluate very poorly its quality. Rich people do not drinking, yet poorer households drink water from the tap. So we see an unequal dependence of poorer households really depend on the quality of tap water, while richer households, not really, because they can buy bottled water, have filters. When we have water supply cuts, poorer households have to accumulate water in this kind of recipients, while richer households buy bottled water or they have their pools. And it's also very interesting to understand how households work, no? So here we have the first one on the top are this how households with higher income operate. So they usually have a central filter, and when we have water supply cuts, they can buy bottled water. In middle class households, they mostly use these jars and buy less bottled water. And in lower households, it's most common to see people boiling water in order to improve their quality. And we have water storage in the case of supply cuts. To do that, I work with the concept of metabolism to understand how households metabolize water, and we can see some very interesting differences. An average household of 4 people with higher income, they consume almost 22 cubic meters per month. This is much lower in middle class and lower class households. We also see that they all consume bottled water. And it's also interesting to see the total water cost. For upper class households, they spend 3.4% of their income on water. Well, this is double for middle class households, and it's 14% of their income on water. This is quite terrible because the World Health Organization says that the households should spend up to 3% of household income on water, and this is by far superated in Antofagasta, especially for lower class households. I then focus on gender and how we have these burdens borne by women. And I think I will finish with these final thoughts that I can leave them here maybe for a conversation or questions. Thank you very much. I'm sorry for not being able to be on time. So that's it.
Thank you so much.